Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps. In today's special episode, we're talking to author Sarah Easter Collins about her debut novel, Things Don't Break on Their Own. This is available July 16th in the US, and it's a literary suspense narrative filled with mystery, family secrets, and thoughtfully conveys the Rashomon effect for a writing style, which I'm excited to talk about. In addition to writing, Sarah is an artist with beautiful paintings that you can see on her website. She's also worked in education, teaching art in the UK, Botswana, Thailand, and Malawi. She's a mother and currently lives on Exmoor with her husband and dogs. Sarah is a graduate of the Curtis Brown Creative Novel Writing course. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bree. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm so excited to talk to you, and congratulations again on Things Don't Break on Their Own. So excited to see this going to so many different countries, being translated in multiple languages. That's amazing.
Thank you very much. It feels like a wonderful thing for me. I'm really enjoying the journey.
I'm sure it's a bit of a whirlwind. Before we talk about it, because I do want to get all into that, I know you have a nightcap pairing for us, which has not only personal ties, but some connection to the book as well. So, do you want to tell us what that is?
Oh, yes. So I have picked Malawi gin and tonic. And I'll have it, please, with some ice and a little bit of cucumber in there. I do love cucumber in gin. But I'm choosing particularly Malawi gin, which actually I can't find in the UK. So this is a dream drink. But when I used to live in Lilongwe, it was a drink that some friends and I used to share together and enjoy. But it's also got a link to the book because there's a gin bottle sort of particularly mentioned by Willa's mother, and I can't give too much away, but those bottles have a role in the book, the gin bottles.
They do. I love the personal tie too. That's just so unique. It's a very very cool experience. I'm sure. Maybe we can talk a little bit about what that was like. But let's talk about the book first. So this is just coming out, especially for those of us in the US when this episode airs. So for people that haven't read it yet, can you give us a brief description as to what this is about?
Ah, yes. So this is really a story about sisters. There is a missing sister in it in the story, but it's also very much a story about the unreliability of memory and about friendship and sisterhood and a dinner party that goes wildly wrong and um, yeah so and about families. It's really a story about families, and although it's certainly a story in which dark things happen, is a story that's also full of love and full of tenderness and full of bone deep loyalty to each other, particularly amongst the women characters.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with that. And it is. There are certainly some darker elements and themes to that, but yet the bonds that you see between the different characters too, uh, to me, that gives it a very realistic, I mean, experience for the. So go back to the beginning then, I guess, when you were inspired to write this story. How long was this in the back of your head before you sat down to put pen to paper, keys, obviously?
I was thinking about that story for a long time. Um, I had the opening at Robin's house in my mind for a very long time, actually, and I had it almost fully realized as a scene. I had her family; they felt very real to me. Her mother, her father, her brother, and then I knew I wanted somebody to be missing in that story. And for a long time, I thought the person who was going to go missing would actually be Robin's brother, Michael.
Really?
Yes. And then, of course, I got stuck. And the reason I was getting stuck is because in that family, nobody would ever go missing.
Yeah.
That, and if they were missing, they would always be found.
Right.
So
They would turn over
this
every rock to find the solution.
exactly that, yes. And I realized that that was the thing that was stopping me from making progress with the story because it was just wrong. And then I went to a dinner party, and at that dinner party, one of the people there, a man, was somebody who spent the entire evening talking about himself. He was a very physically large man, and he dominated the conversation throughout the entire evening. And in fact, nobody really else got another word in. So he mainly spoke to one other man at the table who he'd obviously has decided was in his own social class or background or something like that. And because his voice was so loud and so dominant, pretty much everybody else was forced to listen to him. And I went away and suddenly it made me think about at a table like that, at a dinner party, how everybody's bringing their own stories to the table and how individual those stories are, and how actually, if you don't talk to people, you'll never find out those stories are. And as you know, one of the themes in the story of Things Don't Break on Their Own is hidden histories. So um, so then I suddenly realized, oh, hang on a minute. The missing person, the missing child, is not the daughter of a family like Robin's family. It's the daughter of somebody like this man at the dinner table. And suddenly I realized it was not anybody in Robin's family but her friend, the sister of her friend. And suddenly I had a whole story. And at that point, I could not stop writing. I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, creeping downstairs because I just couldn't sleep. I was having such fun with writing this story. And I just felt I was writing very, very fast, just, and I was completely focused on it. I kept thinking, at some point, I need to stop and plot this whole thing out. But I was having such fun, I just couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
I just wrote and wrote to the end, and I got to the end of the first draft in about 3.5 months. So yeah, yeah.
That's that's incredible too. The way that the dinner scene all plays out too, and then when you start to get the background from the different perspectives, you can see it so clearly with your writing. I was like, this could easily be a TV or show or a movie because I can picture this. I can picture all of this. Like I can picture the people arriving late and what people say. You can just visualize everyone's facial expression. So it's it's very captivating from the start. And then, especially with some of the topics that come up at that dinner regarding your memory, and people even like how everyone will remember the dinner differently 6 months from now, is so it's fascinating. So, with that, too, this story definitely has psychological elements to it. Did you have to do any research? I know you said you kind of pants the novel a little bit, but did you have to do extensive research, or did you have a background on any of that information?
I didn't have a background. Yeah, so the beauty of the internet is you can look up anything you want to find out. So I started researching into memory and realized, oh, this is completely fascinating. And I found out an awful lot about implicit and explicit memories, how we remember things in different ways, and how an implicit memory is sort of association. So if when you think about when you're a small child, you might have a sense, your memories are actually a sense of that time rather than one specific thing. And then explicit memories come later, start forming later, where you can remember exact events. But up to about 3 or 4, we're really remembering a sort of an amalgamation of all your memories together, where it's all sort of mixed in together, and it's really sort of almost summing up a time in your head rather than landing on any particular thing. Yeah.
Right. Or your memory from those is like it's what someone else told you, but then you
Yes.
process it and you think it's a memory, even though it's really just someone was telling you a story about that time, but you were too young to actually have the memory. I That all was so intriguing to me with the dinner, because I can recall a dinner that I was at where someone brought up a memory and most of the people at the table had been there, and their recollection of that event was drastically different from every other person at that table, and everyone kind of looked around awkwardly thinking, do you do you remember it that way? It was just, it was very strange. And so when that came up in the novel, it immediately brought me to that dinner and having a similar experience where that had happened before. It's
I think
very
that definitely happens, and we are all ultimately unreliable narrators because we all will remember different elements of a thing. You know, my focus on something might be completely different from somebody else's focus, so we'll remember the same event in different ways. And and then, of course, there's the problem with language. You know, our ability to express what we remember, what we think, what we feel is all uh, filtered through language. And so just picking one word over another word actually means that we could actually put completely different weight on a story just in our choice of language. And of course, English doesn't even have the words for everything. Sometimes we have to borrow words from other languages just to express what we want to say. So that combination of both memory and the way we might tell a story means that everybody is going to have a different take on something. It has to be like that.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, and I don't feel like people talk about it enough that it is, even though we're experiencing that every single day. And so part of that, in addition to people's memories and perceptions of the same event being different from person to person, this also explores, how people, specifically children in the same family, can have wildly different experiences growing up, and therefore different memories, and when they think back to their childhood, it could be drastically different. um, where did this inspiration come from? I don't know if it's a personal thing. I know you've also taught too, but what made you want to include that aspect of the novel?
Well, I think that children in families and in schools, but particularly in families, can actually often be labeled if there are a number of siblings, and they can be labeled as the academic one, the sporty one, the arty one, the difficult one, the dreamy one, and so it goes on. And then I think sometimes those labels can become self-fulfilling. That's who we grow into because that's who we're being told we are. So I think there's that aspect of it, that we become those people. And also we have such different abilities. I mean, I have two siblings, so there's three of us, and we are very, very different people. I should say we're also really close. You know, we're a very close family. I'm close to both my sister and my brother, but um, we are we have such different skill sets. I mean, there are things that they can do I literally have no idea about. So and you know, I they are people I would call upon first for help with things that I don't know and don't understand and never will. So but you know, it feels you know, that I think that is an absolute truth, that siblings have very, very different experiences and become different people.
Yeah, and it's it can be, to your point, you can be very different and then lean on one another for those different strengths, or in some instances it becomes really complex, but they are all very different. I mean, but similarly, so I have three siblings, and so there's four of us, and we are all so very, very different from one another. And my mom says this too. She's like, I don't know how I created all four of you. You're all so different, but life would be really boring if you were all the same.
Wouldn't
So,
it?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's really natural, but it's definitely a complexity that I appreciated was explored in your book between Willa and her sister. So I don't want to like lean too heavily on a dark topic when it comes to Leica, but it's mentioned in the story, and obviously that's her name. For Without getting too sad, can you tell us a little bit about her name and the first dog in space,
Yes,
being that
absolutely.
she's mentioned in the story?
So in the story, her name, Leica, is explained as that she was born on the anniversary of the day that the first dog, Leica, was shot up into space, and that they somehow picked this name. But obviously, I'm conveying much more with that name, that choice of name, both in terms of Leica's treatment at home and also in terms of I wanted to convey that I think people are often quite good. I'm not sure good is the right word, but at holding different beliefs simultaneously in their own mind. So, on one hand, they might know that whatever happened with Laika the dog, the real dog in space, is pretty dreadful. And yet, also, if you Google Laika the dog, you can find all these happy little smiling cartoons of a smiley little dog who is like driving a rocket, looking very sweet and very happy. And you can buy little plastic rockets with little plastic dogs to go in them for your children so that they can play with this this fantasy, and it is a complete fantasy. And I'm not going to go into detail of
Yeah.
what really happened to Leica the dog, but for me, for me, what I wanted to convey was that sense that we sometimes present information to ourselves, particularly about animals, probably in a palatable way, and that actually the treatment of animals is not always palatable and and that generally in life also sometimes people repackage unpalatable things in a way that feels more acceptable. And certainly the Willa and Leica's family, they are the whole family presenting to the outside world this perfect family. You know, they're wealthy and they live in a lovely home, and things seem very good from the outside, but from the inside, that's really not what their family is like.
Yeah, very well said. And it's so true. We do that on so many levels where we make a lot of different topics palatable for people. Um, and sometimes we do that just on our own too, where we don't want to showcase the real side of what happened. So we say, okay, how can I make this softer for the recipient of the information? But they they have certainly done that, and it is a tragic story, but as you said, brings so much more meaning to who Leica is in this story. Um, so you went your writing style with this. We have different perspectives from some of the key women in this story. What was that process like? Did you know that you were going to do that from the beginning as well?
Um, I think that just sort of evolved organically as the characters evolved and the story evolved. Um, there is a wonderful quote, I could probably find it for you if you give me a moment, by
Absolutely.
Dr. O. Hang on, I'll just see if I can find it. It says, writing's like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And for me, that's what writing the book was like. You know, I began with the characters and the relationships between them, and then from that point forward, I was really thinking how they interact with each other. And so, in terms of uh, the relationships between the sisters, that it became, and the women and all the women in that story, it all sort of grew a little bit organically, really. Yeah. I was finding my way with it, and then constantly going back and
Of course.
reworking bits as I went forward. I was like, oh, okay, so now I need to do that back there.
Of course. No. And well, now that you say that too, and just with the story, it feels very natural as it progresses through the different perspectives until we reach a certain point. And at that point, I mean, I was like, oh my goodness. um, I know I've said it multiple times, but got actual chills when there was one specific line, and I was like, oh my goodness. um, but you know, I mean, that moment too, though, because as we said, there are like some heavier things. So to reach that moment too, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, let's get through this. I don't want to spoil it. And I feel like if I talk about it too much, then I'm going to give it away. But you do have that moment in there. Um, let's see.
I have to admit or agree. I've actually had to teach myself how to talk about this story without giving away spoilers. It's not easy, particularly to talk about it without giving away things that I think are quite vital not to give away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's even when I was trying to think of questions, I was thinking, okay, how can I ask this without it leading to, because there, yes, this is a story of family trauma and these women and everything, but there's also the mystery too, and the suspense and wanting all of that. And I didn't want to give any of it away for anyone that wants to read it too. Um, so I know that you're a graduate of the Curtis Brown Creative Novel Writing course. Can you tell me a little bit about when you did that? What was that experience like too, and how did it contribute to writing this novel?
That was it was wonderful, and actually I would hugely recommend it. It was an online course, and I took it in at the beginning of 2021. So I had begun writing the novel in the January, and I think the course started in the March. So I was already by that time, sort of 30 or 40,000 words in. And because I was writing so fast, I was and then I was writing it during the course. And there were 15 of us in our class, and those people have become such good friends. We are all around the world, and yet those of us who can meet up do meet up in real life. And I found myself in this group of really spirited writers. And, I suddenly realized I had this group of writer friends that I could trust and talk to and ask questions of and bash ideas around with. And and these were people who were also completely committed to writing their own novels. And it was lovely to be able to talk to them about the writing they were doing. And it was a really, really valuable time for me, and I think for all of us. And we've stayed great friends ever since. And I would recommend it to anyone. I think having a group of trusted writer friends that who you can talk to is absolutely brilliant. It was, yeah, huge recommend from me.
Yeah, I've heard that that's extremely helpful when you have another group of writers that you can they know a little bit more about what the experience is like. You can talk to, ask them questions. So that's amazing. I was looking it up too. Looking, they have a variety of courses to choose from, which I thought was so incredible. So if you want to take a course that's genre specific, like they have that. It seemed very very it piqued my interest. That's for sure.
And there are
Um,
long courses and short courses, and also, I should say, for me, the experience was life changing, because at the end of that, I was offered representation by my agent.
I was
And
gonna ask.
yeah,
Okay.
yes. And I mean, not exactly at the end of the course. I think we finished in the June or July or something, and she made me an offer in the November. But it was like, oh wow, it definitely happened as a result of doing that course. So it, it it was just absolutely brilliant for me, and has literally changed my life. Yeah.
That's incredible. That okay, I was gonna ask a little bit about what your publishing process turned ended up being like. So you got your agent after that.
And not
Um,
just any agent, but honestly, a dream agent. I could not have asked for a better agent. And in fact, you know, her insight into the book before we went to submission to was phenomenal. She actually made me rewrite uh, she made a suggestion that made me rewrite the last 30,000 words. So, or she pointed something out that was so, once she'd said it, I couldn't unsee it. And so to have somebody with that level of insight is just phenomenal. I mean, to have somebody you know who is on your side and who also wants the book to be the best it could possibly be, and is wise and intelligent is just a gift to have that. And
Absolutely.
then we went to submission. I think we worked on the book from the November to say the next June, July maybe, and then we had the summer off and went to submission in the September. And that's when it started selling to the UK and to the US. And again, then I got to work with some brilliant editors. And again, that experience of being edited by people who just come in with these brilliant insights and comments has been amazing. I've been so grateful for it. And they, you know, I've worked with such wise and generous people, and it's been a joy.
And just to reiterate your point too, because I sometimes feel like there's a bit of a misconception about the industry, but hearing your experience and then others too, your agent and these editors, they're all on your side. They truly want it to be the best that it can be. And it just takes a team to get it there. And I know for people that are just readers and don't necessarily see the writing side of that, there's just some misunderstandings about that. But it really is just wanting to turn it into the best possible book. So that's great that you've had such an amazing experience too. I know I've talked a couple of times with Jenny Myers Sane. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a YA doll. She's a YA author here in the U.S. But she has said the same thing. She adores her agent and says, he's just made it the best experience possible. And so it does seem like your agent and having that great relationship is really key to the positive experience.
It's been really positive and has been an absolute joy. And you know, there's sometimes some tough things. People will tell you how it is.
Yeah,
So, but actually, that's what you also need. You need people to say this works and this doesn't work, and that's what you need. You have to be able to pick that up and run with it and work with it and think about it. But like I said, everybody's essentially on the same wavelength. Everybody wants the same thing at the end.
absolutely. I want to talk. So, in addition to all of the psychological themes that I've been fascinated by with your novel, I'm also very intrigued by all of the traveling that you've done in your life. We talked about Malawi, and I know you've also done work and been to Thailand, which is also mentioned in the book. So, can you tell me a little bit about your world travels, about teaching in all of these different countries, and what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was at university doing in my last year, I used to walk every day past a poster that advertised the Teachers for Botswana recruitment scheme. And I just thought, oh, yeah, every day I walked past this poster, and every day I thought, oh, I didn't even know where Botswana was. But then I went and looked it up and realized it was this landlocked country just above South Africa. And the more I saw that poster, the more I wanted to do it. So that was actually my first job out of university. So, and I stayed there for 2.5 years. I lived on the edge of the Okavango Delta. I lived in a house that was right on the Tamalakani River, and it was full of hippo. I could hear them every night. And the, as I said, the Okavango Delta was right on my doorstep. So it was, you know, the last great animal refuge in Africa, it felt like. And it was just a completely magical place to work. And I worked in Mound Secondary School and also another school called Shashi Secondary School. And at Mound Secondary School, there were 1,000 Botswana kids. Some of them were actually older than me because they had a very progressive policy there that said if a girl got pregnant, she could go back to school. So after she'd
Oh,
had,
okay.
so yeah, I had a fourth year with 4 children at the time. So and it was absolutely magical. I loved it. I love my colleagues. I love the kids. I'm still in contact with people. I mean, students that I taught to, of course, are actually not that much younger than me or about the same age as me because I was straight out of uni. They were a couple of years younger. So we've all just become friends in the years since. And I would go back to Botswana in a heartbeat. It's the most magical place.
That's
And
amazing. Oh,
yeah,
that's so cool.
yeah, and then I worked in Thailand for 5 years on again teaching. At that time, my son was age 2, and so we went out there and spent 5 years in Phuket. And at a new secondary school there, it had only been open a year when we went out there. And then from there, went to Malawi and taught in Lilongwe and discovered Malawi gin.
There we go.
And then after that, I came back to the UK when my son was 9, and in time for him to really get his feet under the table in a British school. Yeah.
Incredible. It sounds like you have great memories of all of those locations. So I don't even want to ask you to pick a favorite, but just I know you were saying, it's amazing to be where you are now, but I would credit all of your life experience has helped shape what this book could be and where you're at now too, because you mentioned some of those places in the book, and I imagine that's because of like your personal ties to them.
Yes, yes. In fact, there was a whole scene set in Phuket, which actually went out in the editing process. But yes, it's so much easier to write about places that you can somehow visualize. So of course, I suppose I'm going to draw upon them for, um, yeah, and think about them. Yeah.
I would think I would agree with that. It'd be very hard to write about a place I'd never
Mm.
seen or experienced myself. Um, in addition to the art that is writing, I also know that you are a painter, and I looked at some of the just stunning, for me, like very calming paintings that you had on your website. How long have you been doing that? You're just an artist on many levels.
I My degree actually was English and fine art. So that's what I studied. And I find that really fascinating that at that time, in choosing to do a combined honors degree, I couldn't decide between two subjects that I really loved. And here I still am all these years later,
Right.
still not really able to decide between the two of them. I love both things. I must admit I'm doing slightly less art at the moment because I'm currently writing quite a lot each day, hours and hours. And when I get up from the computer, I'm often like, oh, I need to get outside and I need to walk the dogs and I need to, see the outside world and feel the wind on my face um, yeah, and I don't always fancy going and sitting in the studio and actually being by myself again and sitting again. It's the sitting that's the problem. So I want to be a bit more active than that. But
I totally understand that. I'm the same way. I typically work within these four walls, and by the end of the day, I think I need fresh air, I need sun, I need a walk. So that makes sense.
Exactly. And I'm really grateful because where we live on Exmoor, we are surrounded very much like by the landscape that I describe from Robin's family home. So it's incredibly beautiful. It's we're full of sort of steep combes and rivers and woodland and ancient woodland, and we have wild ponies and a lot of deer, and um, and I can walk literally all day and not see another soul. So it's an incredibly beautiful place to be, and also that's where I do a lot of my thinking. So I that's where I will come up with, sometimes whole conversations that will be playing around my head, and then I've got to run back and actually get them down before I forget them.
Yeah, and with all of the peace and quiet, I would imagine that's great for your thought process and thinking all of those and having conversations with your characters. So
Exactly that. Conversations with my characters. I love how you put that. Yes, that's how it happens.
exactly, yes, yep. I don't write the way that you do, but I'm the same way. Even when I walk my dog, I'm thinking about it and having those conversations with the fictional people. So you say you're writing a lot. Does that mean that you're already working on book two?
I am working on book two. Yes, I was literally working on it just, minutes before you and I started talking. And book two, the stage I'm at is my agent has seen it
Okay.
and given me a few notes, which I'm currently working on. And then we're going to get it to the editors in the UK and the US very soon, I hope. And I don't want to say too much about it, but just to say it's about a mother and a daughter who are on the run together. So,
Oh, okay.
it's obviously a different story. It's not a sequel,
Mhm.
but I think if people like the writing in Things Don't Break on Their Own, I think they will like the writing in the new story too.
Wonderful. Well, you sound very busy, but with your book release and being that it's releasing in multiple different countries, are you going anywhere? Are you celebrating this in any way? Are you touring anywhere? What's going on?
Well, I did take my very large lurcher, who is a great greyhound deerhound cross, and we went to Bath together. Bath's a really beautiful country
I've
town near us,
been.
and we went to look at my book in a bookshop, and I looked at my book, and everybody in the bookshop looked at the dog because he's so big and beautiful. so so we've done that, and then I, I had a little celebration here on Exmoor with friends, close friends, and that was absolutely lovely. And I'm really enjoying this process, and sort of talking to my agent and the editors, and it's wonderful. So yes, I'm doing
It's
little mini tours of things and going to bookshops, and in fact, quite soon I'm doing a book walk here on Exmoor. So with the book, it's like a book club walk. So we go in a group up into the woods and talk on all the way, and then sit round by a fire, and then walk back down through the woods later. So yeah, I'm really looking
um,
forward to doing that.
I wish we didn't have an entire ocean separating us because that sounds incredible and so beautiful. The way picturing you taking your dog and going into a bookshop in Bath and looking at your book is probably the most beautiful scene that I didn't actually see, but getting that in my head would probably bring tears to my eyes just being able to visualize you doing that. That's just so beautiful, and we have wonderful bookshops here, but nothing like that. And having been to Bath and knowing how amazing it is, just that's a lovely, lovely picture. So I'm
Oh,
glad
you've
that you
been
had.
to Bath? Yes, Bath is beautiful.
Yes, I've been one time. I still remember it, and it was, yeah, it was incredible. So, and I haven't been able to be back since, but I've always wanted to.
There's
My
a
husband.
really, really beautiful bookshop there, and there is a number of lovely bookshops in Bath, but there's one which is quite near the baths itself, with these lovely stone steps up to it, and it's got all these wonderful. The shelves are so high; they've got ladders in there, and oh, I just love it. Yeah.
That's so nice. Well, when I make it back, I'm not going to say if, but when I'm going to have to go back and I'll think about you when I go to a bookshop. Hopefully, look for your book and see it there. Maybe by then it'll be book two.
Yes, yes, it could be. You never know.
Could be. I don't think I'll be making it there anytime soon, or at least not this year. So maybe by book two, I'll be able to. Um, I do. I'm a dog lover, as you clearly saw when mine was just jumping up all over. But I saw on your website too, you talked about your dog, but you have many other photos of other dogs too. Who are all of they?
Okay, well, we have two dogs actually. We have
Okay.
the very large Deerhound Greyhound cross, who's a rescue. His name is Louis. That's the name he came with. But he's just such a big doofus. It's just incredible. Anyway, his very sweet nature, just a sort of slightly balmy dog. And then we have a much older Labrador called Molly. She's really, really sweet, and she's sort of quite motherly towards him. And then on the website you would have also seen my beloved Sidley, who I actually mention in my thanks in Things Don't Break on Their Own, because he was the dog who stayed with me the whole time, throughout the whole time I wrote that. When I
I
was
saw
creeping
that.
down at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was creeping down too, and he'd be right by my feet. He was such a beautiful, beautiful creature. So I miss him a lot.
Yeah. Oh, how wonderful that you live on such a beautiful piece of land where they can be with you and experience that too. That's very, very sweet. For everyone that is interested in Things Don't Break on their own and also learning more about you, where can they find you?
Oh, okay. So I am on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter. I think I use Instagram a little bit more than Twitter, to be honest. And I have a website. So, if anybody wants to Google me, they can see all the pictures of the rescue dogs
All the pictures of the dogs, of your
and the
paintings.
paintings too. Yeah, and catch up with news and things. And it'd be lovely to connect with people.
Absolutely. And the different covers too, because
Yes.
the three covers I've seen so far, I love them all.
So
So
do I.
they're all wonderful. So anyone that
They're all
wants to
so
see that,
different.
they
And
are.
I love how they've each picked up different things to use as the cover. And I really think cover designers are the unsung heroes. They are just brilliant how they look at a story and then capture something about it that is absolutely vital and just feels so right. And I just think they do an amazing job. Anybody who can design a cover and get, oh, people are going to want to pick that one up, and it tells them already something that is vital. They somehow manage to catch something, and I think with all three of those covers, they do so. Yeah.
They really do. I love talking with cover designers too when they're talking about a book and the color psychology that they've used for that specifically. It's so interesting. They're so talented. But the three that I've seen for years so far, I love how each one has turned out. So for anyone that wants to see that, that is on your website, and I'll link to all of that too in the podcast notes so that everyone can just click and either go to your website, go to your Instagram or Twitter, whatever you want to do to follow along. Sarah, thank you so much for spending this time with me talking about your book. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations again, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to read it and then get the backstory of how this book came to be.
Oh, thank you, Brie. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for your good wishes. I really appreciate it. This is part of the journey for me, which has been so much fun. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And I forgot to mention this to you earlier, but I always end an episode by saying cheers.
Oh, cheers.